have such sights to show you.
We're Poppin the Scary horror podcast here. I'm your host Coale, and with me as always I have my good friend and co-host Aaron.
Hi.
Hello Aaron, how you doing?
I just lost a pint of blood.
Ooh, very nice, very nice. Losing points before we grab a point.
Yeah, before we grab a pint and watch this movie, hey?
Yeah, I think we're going to need something harder. I have a feeling anyhow. I think we're going to need something harder before we watch Rosemary's Baby, because this is another film that kind of, for me, joins the ranks of The Exorcist on films that I'm a little trepidatious getting ready to watch there due to the subject matter and everything. I only know a brief synopsis of it, so I'll keep it minimal since you don't really have any idea about this film.
Yeah.
But basically, this is a film that is definitely present in the horror community, regarded as one of the top films in the horror genre there. So definitely a little bit of a build up for me heading into it. But aside from that, don't know too much. Going to keep it on the DL, you know what I mean, fam? And I'll ask you again, Aaron, any idea about Rosemary's Baby or anything like that at all whatsoever?
No, this is one of those films where like I've heard mentioned a lot, but not like specifics, or if I have heard specifics, I can't remember any of them. So, but yeah, it's always been in that context of like, yeah, this is a great horror film, and also this is like a difficult one to watch, maybe. So we'll find out.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I don't know. Like, I love I love watching movies in general there, and I feel like I try to be open to as many films as I possibly can. However, whenever it gets to films that are hard to watch and stuff, it's like I'm a little more reserved whenever it comes to watching those films, because again, I mostly use it as a way to escape, view art or just be entertained, kind of both camps there. And whenever it comes to stuff that just kind of makes it hard to sit through there, it's very different for me depending on the film. Sometimes the films are like, man, that was rough, but had a lot of good cinematography and stuff. Other times it's just like pure torture for me. Stuff that I'm like, get me out of here. I just want to chunk this movie into this flaming bright sun, basically. So I'm definitely going to try to be ready, both really just mentally. Physically, all I had to do was sit there.
I'm strapping myself in.
Yeah, absolutely. We're just grabbing our seatbelts. So everybody stay buckled in, because we'll be right back after we watch Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah.
I don't think...
Babies.
Baby on board.
Hey, what are you doing Friday night? Friday night? Nothing. Now. Okay, you want to come with me and see the baby? Oh, fasten your seatbelts. We're going to see the baby.
And we are back from watching Rosemary's Baby.
Rosemary's precious little baby infant child.
Yes, little bundle of joy.
Little joy's bundle.
Yes, exactly. So Aaron, I haven't talked to you since we stopped the film, but how you feeling, boss?
Yeah, that was a journey. Yeah, that was a slow burn, mysterious, what's going on? What's going on and who's involved kind of film.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. It's definitely a slow burn, and by slow, I do mean slow. Not necessarily bad.
No.
But with a runtime of 137 minutes, you feel every minute passing by, which I think is
true.
I find it to be both good and okay. I think that's the way I would describe it as, is the fact that I think it's definitely good that you're feeling like the burn slowly going by. And surprisingly, it keeps a fairly even burn. I never feel like it just immediately jumps the shark pacing wise. So it was definitely a very slow descent, I would definitely say there. But overall, for being a little trepidatious, knowing what I knew about it there, I am pleasantly surprised I am not traumatized more.
Yeah, no, I'd say the same. Yeah, I mean, I didn't know a whole lot going in. I just knew that there were some difficult to watch moments in that movie. And I don't think it was any more difficult than something like the Witch or The Exorcist or something like that.
I would agree with that. I
Season
think it's
3 of The Sopranos. Sorry, we just finished that season. There were some difficult to watch scenes there.
Man, I'm trying to catch up. I'm still in season 1.
You got it.
I know, but you gabagool, you know what I'm saying?
You liking it?
The Mario Kart. So we're gonna stop the Soprano talk there and keep talking about Rosemary's Baby, and I guess a good place to start is talking about the story. So the story is based off of the novel, and it pretty much tells a story about Rosemary and her husband moving into this new apartment, which I believe is in New York, right?
Yeah, Manhattan.
Yes, around that area there. And so pretty much it's one of those things where they're living together in the apartment and they encounter some neighbors there.
Some quirky old neighbors.
Yes, quirky neighbors there. And as they get to know them more and more, and Rosemary tries to plan her life, which includes having a kiddo. I know, major spoiler alert.
There is a baby.
But
Rosemary baby.
Lots of things start happening there and spiral downwards as the plot progresses. So I think that's the best I could describe there. There's definitely an incident that kind of happens towards, surprisingly, not as early as I was expecting, because I knew about the incident that occurred there. But whenever the incident does occur, it's definitely another plot point that Rosemary has to struggle and deal with as well.
Absolutely. I mean, much of this film sort of focuses on her life planning, particularly her journey through pregnancy. And it's a difficult pregnancy in some weird ways. And that's where a lot of the slow burn kind of comes from, is because you're kind of feeling all 9 months of the pregnancy as she goes through this stage, But it's it's an interesting one.
Yeah, and the thing I can commend about it is, obviously, it's a long film, and maybe if it was shortened up, it wouldn't feel this way. But in comparison to, say, something like The Exorcist, which also is kind of a slow burn, kind of not, with some of the shocking moments there. I feel like it does a really good job just keeping an even pace, and just, I never felt like once things like sped up and I'm just like, okay, now we're here or whatever.
Right.
It was.
I feel like it's a slow pace, but it's a good pace. You know what I mean? It's a good example of, you don't have to be this and this and this and this to have a well-paced film. This is very slow, but important things are happening. It's just, it's really easing you into it and giving you little hints and things to think about and mysteries. All that's packed in there, just in a very sort of mundane, here's the life of a housewife kind of way. Yeah,
I definitely think, especially with a lot of the stuff the film sets out to do there, I feel like in order not to make it jarring or anything like that, you have to kind of take this pace here. 'Cause, like I said, literally, I just imagine kind of like how you burn paper and how it kind of slowly simmers down. That's the exact pacing of the film, which isn't bad, but there's definitely a lot of moments where I would sometimes kind of zone out of the film there a little bit and then bring myself back in, because it's one of those things that you're just kind of sitting there with Rosemary going through the exact same motions as she is, which is a lot. She goes through a lot emotionally throughout this entire film there, but at the same point, I feel like this is also something you can't just speed up willy-nilly there.
Right.
So I think overall, I mean, story-wise, I was pretty happy. Only some of the issues I have is maybe sometimes the characterization of the characters, but I feel like that's really kind of more so nitpicking there on some of them, which I'm sure we could talk about. Honestly, probably the best actor, or should I say actress, in this entire film is Rosemary, played by Mia Farrow. And yeah, I mean, there's a reason she's the leading lady. She does a good job, has a lot to do on her plate whenever it comes to her character, and it's really great seeing her kind of being able to display these emotions, because, you know, towards the beginning of the film, she's like super bubbly, happy, you know, a little bit extroverted there, you know, going around. But as a lot of stuff tends to build on her emotionally, she has to change gears. And as questions start popping up and everything, she has to kind of figure it out emotionally there. So she had a large order, and she just did perfect. I feel like she just did an excellent, perfect job there. Definitely surprised that whenever it comes to leading women in horror, she's not brought up a little bit more than others. But Aaron, how are your thoughts about her performance as Rosemary?
Oh, she did great, and she had a lot. Yeah, like you mentioned, a lot on her plate to do, not just emotionally, but physically too. I mean, she goes through kind of all the stages of pregnancy. She's like really thin, tired at one point. She's like, you know, she's got to do a little bit of running and various physical condition. I mean, she's got to do it all. So, I mean, just really impressive performance, I think, from Mia Farrow.
Yes, I would agree. Moving on to the, I guess, the leading guy, I guess I would say.
His leading guy?
Yes,
his name is Guy.
Yes, his... Oh my god, it wasn't even trying to make a joke, but I just set it up. Yes, the character Guy Woodhouse, played by John Cassavetes, is playing her husband, and I feel like he does a pretty good job at the beginning, just being the more kind of like low-key sort of like, you know, yeah, you know, it's fine, whatever. It's like, even whenever they're looking at the apartment, he's like, nah, like, not too impressed. He's like, whatever. And, you know, he's working as an actor, and he's tried making it big, but just is struggling because, you know, working as an actor be like that.
Eat hard, yeah.
Yeah, and so pretty much he's trying to get a lot of work, but isn't working. And even whenever they go meet the neighbors, he's like, I don't want to meet any neighbors, you know, just a bunch of old people, whatever. And I feel like he does a really good job at the beginning, just being very low-key, down low. But I think with what the script requires him to do is something that I feel like isn't too much, I guess, the fault of the actor, as it is kind of like the way the script is written. Because I feel like in the one way, he starts changing as the film progresses as well there. However, there's just some points where you believe his mentality and enthusiasm there, and then other times it's like, okay, it's either like, you know, super over the top delusional sort of thing, and maybe they were going for that, like maybe they were going for the more abstract kind of performance there. But for me, it just kind of pulled it out, because maybe the only way I could see it is due to like Rosemary's condition there, that everything's getting heightened there. So like her husband seeming like he's okay, even though she is definitely not okay, working through. So I'm a little mixed on his performance. Overall, I still give it a pretty good passing grade. It's just there were some moments that I'm just like, I will say, like I said, I think he's best whenever he's more subtle with stuff than whenever he's like blatantly spelling it out there.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I feel like he does have some underplayed sort of elements he has to do as an actor, because he's, you know, he does go through those changes. He has to be sort of charming, but also, you know, a lot of his difficulty and the difficulty in their relationship or whatever early on is that he's focused too much on work, you know, and then he's got to sort of shift gears from that to being sort of, you know, he's the father of this baby, but like he's got this little mystery question mark. Is he doing enough for her, to the audience? You know, is he helping out with this pregnancy? Is he dismissing her, or is he just have his head elsewhere? Is it Rosemary that's kind of being a little crazy about the what's going on? You know. So.
Yeah, and you know, and we could talk probably about it more in spoilers. It's kind of hard. I mean, people usually know kind of like the general idea of Rosemary's Baby. However, we're just trying to keep it as light as possible whenever it comes to it, especially since the pregnancy is kind of like the main point of the plot. But
Right.
as the pregnancy continues, he just continues to be dismissive and everything. And it's one of those things that with the way I thought the plot was going, I thought the plot was going to be something more open-ended towards the end where you never got an answer, which I thought was it just kind of was sitting with me weirdly, being like, are we actually going to get an answer to this, or is it one of those like you got to interpret it there? Moving on, and so we'll talk about it more in spoilers there, but that's just definitely a bullet point to keep in check there.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the neighbors there, one of which is Minnie Castevet, played by Ruth Gordon, and
She's a funny old lady.
yeah, funny old lady there. I feel like definitely she does like the like nonchalant, like once you get to that old age, you're like,
Hello, how you doing? How's your dog?
yeah,
You know?
that she does that perfectly there. I will say there's definitely some points that she's presented there that she just responds the exact same way, and it's one of those things that I'm like, is it just nonchalance to the point of like she's older, she's like, hey, forget about it? Is it something different there? Definitely had me questioning like the performance that she gave there. But I mean, whenever it comes to just being like, oh, I just brought over this smoothie here. It's real good for you. Good for the baby. I mean, does perfectly. Does super duper perfectly. But there is a lot of stuff I feel like, I don't know. I'm so mixed on how I feel about her kind of keeping that exact same tone throughout the entire film.
Yeah. Well,
I'm a little mixed, but at the same point, if she had like a sudden character shift there, I don't think it would have been good.
She's
that
got
way.
sort of a part to play, even in the part she's playing as the neighbor. She has to be the sort of friendly neighbor and put on that front. So I feel like even her actress was putting on that, like, oh, hi, hello, yeah, I'm so friendly neighbor, you know, even though she's kind of, and even earlier on in the film, they talk about just how, like, nosy and, you know, kind of obnoxious she is, but she's, like, trying to hide her being nosy and obnoxious by, you know, being like, oh, hey, I brought over a quiche, you know?
Yeah.
So, I feel like it's kind of, it is a little bit of a performance. It's but you know, I feel like that is kind of the point of her character. She's like, hi, I'm so friendly, and Rosemary's like, stop being friendly.
Yeah. That is definitely true. And then there's also her husband, Roman Castevet, played by Sidney Blackmer, who, again, is like a good foil. He's like just a relaxed, like, oh, I've been everywhere, here and there. You name it, I've been there.
All over the world.
You know, just like sort of like rich upper class dude, kind of like easy going, you know, smoking like cigars and stuff like that. And I feel like overall he also does a pretty good job as well whenever it comes to it. I would definitely say he also does a pretty strong performance, but I feel like he also has a bigger part to play whenever it comes to the interactions and everything there.
Yeah, he's definitely got the vibe of like the old man with a million stories, and like if you really listen to him, they're kind of interesting, but also he won't shut the fuck up about them. You know? Like, okay.
But I feel like he did a fairly good job. I feel like you see him selectively, which I think is good on the film there. I feel like having just Minnie show up constantly makes sense for the character, because again, she's nosy and everything.
And her and Rosemary are kind of like home all the time, because this is the 60s, baby. They're housewives, you know, and the husbands are out of work and they come back, and
Yeah, that's exactly it. And there is other slew of characters that you do meet. However, their involvement is kind of more so mitigated there. Was there any standout performances that you wanted to mention about whenever it came to characters that stood out?
I mean, those four are definitely the biggest ones. There's a few supporting characters that are worth just mentioning, I guess. Hutch is her author friend that comes in and plays you know, an important role. There's the girl they meet at the beginning that's under the care of the neighbors. That's kind of how they get introduced, and that kind of sets up an interesting, weird little mystery thing. Her doctors, both of them, Dr. Hill and Dr. whatever the other guy's name is.
Saperstein.
Saperstein, yeah. They both sort of play interesting roles, but yeah, none of them are as important or dominating of any one aspect of the movie than those four. But.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things that I don't want to dismiss them, but at the same time, it's like one of those things that I'm like, there's not too much to go off of. Again, I feel like Hutch, played by Maurice Evans, does a good job there, and it I think his involvement is super important to the plot because he's kind of the one person who really starts to kind of really be concerned and cared about Rosemary's health during this pregnancy there, because Guy, her husband, is being like dismissive throughout the entire thing,
right?
And so it's kind of nice to see that it's not like everybody against her sort of thing there. And there's even like a party they have later on with their younger friends who are super supportive of it, and I feel like those moments are super important, and I feel like well placed there. Especially Hutch, because not only is it there for like emotional support, but it does add more to the plot due to incidents that happen. So I think like his involvement was necessary and very needed there, especially whenever it comes to delivering some exposition.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like a lot of this movie's tension comes from like a cabin fever, Stockholm syndrome kind of thing, where she's kind of locked in this world with just her neighbors and her husband. And so characters like Hutch are like a great touchstone to the outside world, where sometimes they're like, is something going on? And she's like, oh, is there? You know?
Yeah, and I feel like the gals she meets in the laundromat in the basement there, Terry, or as it says in the credits, it looks like Angela Dorian, played by Victoria Vetri. Pretty much, again, is just kind of seen as like, oh yeah, they're going to start connecting, and just really start talking, because that's just sort of the beginning, like being welcomed into the community there, which again, for how brief it is, I feel like it's very important to like have something like that. Especially because again, her placement there is not only good on an emotional level, but as well as storytelling thing, and kind of building like the whole world they're currently living in there. And then, of course, both the doctors, Dr. Hill, who's a doctor that is seen at the beginning of the film, I feel like he's a doctor, just regular doctor person.
Right.
You do encounter him later in the film there, but talking about the incident, obviously, there's a lot of spoiler plot points that ends up popping here, there, so we'll probably talk about him later, but Charles Grodin, who played him, I felt he played him straight, like 0 issues, but not a lot to comment on.
Yeah, he's just normal doctor guy playing Dr. Man on TV.
And then Dr. Saperstein, played by Ralph Bellarmine, he surprisingly was pretty good as a doctor, and I believed him as a doctor that would act this way, because he's very dismissive about like other doctors. Is like, oh yeah, they think they should do this, or you need to stop reading those pregnancy books, they're just filled with trash basically. And it's sad because I can relate, because it sounds like something exactly a doctor would say nowadays there.
Yeah, he's definitely got that like they kind of introduce him before you even see him as this guy that, oh, he was on this television program. Like, he's kind of like this high-class celebrity doctor. And, like, every time somebody mentions him, they go, oh, I know him, And, when you get there, he's just very self-important. And, like, don't listen to other women. No two pregnancies are the same.
Yes.
Don't read the books. Don't take pills. Have this special shake,
Yeah, that was that was it to a T there, basically. So, I would definitely say that he's also good to kind of add like another foil against Rosemary as she starts growing more and more concerned as she continues on through her pregnancy. And like we mentioned, there's several other characters, but to talk about each and every one of them, it's just kind of like they're basically background characters that are helping move the plot forward. But there wasn't any that were noteworthy bad, so that's pretty good.
True.
Pretty good there. And one thing I do want to compliment is the music that plays. I feel like the music is played selectively, and it's not just like ambient noise there. It's just like a weird melody, I would say, which it was composed by Christopher Cometa. or as his home name is, Christoph Komeda. And I thought the soundtrack was great. Although I will say at the very beginning, they play this music that's like very happy, and there's bright pink letters that just saying like Rosemary's Baby. And for how I knew what was going to happen and the disturbing stuff you see, I was just like, this is so jarring and disturbing to see.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, because the beginning of the film, there's nothing wrong, baby. They're moving to Manhattan. This is all fun and games, you know.
But I feel like overall music, pretty good. There's like a lot of stuff that I'm like, I really like what they're doing with the music here, and it's helping establishing the tone and everything.
Yeah.
And whenever it comes to the cinematography itself, there's definitely a lot of shots that were pretty good. I mean, I wouldn't say that there was like any that well, I don't know, I'd probably take that back. There was a few shots that I'm like, man, that's a really good way they framed that shot there and everything else. But I mean, overall though, I felt like it never distracted me with the cinematography. I felt like I was just immersed.
Right. I don't think they were trying to get too fancy with it, but it was definitely, they did a great job of like, you don't notice the camera, you know, it's you're just in there, you're in that world. But
yeah. It's really hard to talk about this film without talking about major stuff that happens, because there's stuff that happened in this film that even I didn't know about.
I don't even want to talk about the hints, because this movie is such like a slow burn, subtle thing that if even pointing out the hints might give away what the end is.
Yes, that's the exact problem. I am walking on a very, very thin line there, and I'm not trying to spoil nothing. So this might be one of those things where we're immediately kind of jumping to the halfway point there. I will say one thing, whenever it comes to a horror, you're definitely right, Aaron, that I'm surprised that it was not more horrific than what it was. Trust me, there's a lot of, there's a few horrific scenes there for sure, but especially with how slow of a burn and slow of pace this film is, I was always like, okay, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? Like kind of, you know, like I'm going through like a haunted house or something, think it's something's going to pop around the corner or whatever. Right. And so, with this film, I would agree with Aaron's beginning statement, and the fact that I feel like something like The Witch was a little bit more disturbing. Not to say there isn't some scenes. Like I said, I would probably say there's two.
Yeah, at least one, possibly two or three. Yeah.
Yes, depending on it there, but if you're kind of like me and you were definitely kind of hesitant to watch, depending on how traumatized you would get, and we'll kind of talk about some of the stuff that happens later in the scenes, I would definitely say don't be quite as trepidatious about it as I was. Yeah. Granted, there's definitely some hard moments to watch, I would say, but I feel like whenever it comes to those hard moments, it was done tastefully.
They didn't show directly too much.
Yes,
things.
And I didn't feel like they tried to relish in the moment.
No,
I felt like whenever it came to tackling these topics and situations there, they did it respectfully there, which I'm sure especially because it was 1960 whenever this film came out, it could have possibly just been that they were not allowed to go crazy with it.
It's a funny timeline, because I think that's the same year. This is a Roman Polanski film. Pretty sure that's the same year that his pregnant wife, Sharon Tate, was murdered.
Wow, I did not know
by
that.
The Manson family.
Well then,
so.
That's...
Roman Polanski's interesting.
Yes.
Whenever we started watching the pink credits float up, I was like, oh, Roman Polanski. That guy's a pedophile.
I had not heard, and
I had to recheck the facts because I was like, didn't he like rape a 14-year-old? And so I right before this, I had to look up. I was like, Roman Polanski, he was charged with drugging and raping a 13-year-old girl.
Wow.
And then they like did a plea deal, and so he like didn't have to go to prison. But then this judge was like, no, that's bullshit. You're going to prison for that. And he was like, okay, see ya. And so now he can't leave France because he will be arrested.
Lovely. Well then, I think it's one of those things of trying to separate the art from the artist there.
Right. So it's really, really funny that all these, not in like a ha-ha way, but in like a huh way, that like,
yes.
Some of these things play into his filmmaking.
Yes, clearly. And it's one of those things that don't support the dude there, but at least he directed a overall pretty good film. Without getting too much into spoilers there.
Yeah, it was a good movie. Just weird coincidence that Sharon Tate, pregnant woman, was, I mean, not that, It's just like a weird.
Yes, weird. That is the best way to describe it there. But yes, do be wary that there is a couple of scenes whenever it comes to sexual violence, I would say.
True.
I'm going to try to keep around it lightly, and just some just really dark undertones there. So definitely be ready for that. Again, I will mention, fortunately, they don't relish too much in the act, I would say there. They do have to set up the scene and everything else, but I feel like overall, when it came to it, I was prepared for much worse. So with that being said, I feel like I'm going to spoil something here. Aaron, talk about your rating.
Right. It's always awkward when you have to give a rating without being able to really dig into the details, you know? There's been a few films like that. It's like hard to really justify why I'm rating it, what I'm rating it. But I thought this was an extremely well-made movie. Yeah, it's always a good marker when a movie can be both slow but like keep your attention the whole time. Yeah. I mean, not action-packed by any means, but it doesn't need to be. My score, I'd give it like a. This is like a 9. This is like a high 9. Yeah. Yeah, very well made. I thought it was well acted. I thought the score was great. I thought the pacing was well paced despite being slow. Yeah, gosh, I can't really give away a whole lot, but I just say, like, the way that it sprinkles in hints and details and things is not in your face. It's not, oh, look at this Scooby-Doo box that was colored differently than the background, like, oh, that's the door that's going to open. No, it's really, it gives you all these little details in ways that make sense, in ways that are interesting. You're looking at this sort of life of a woman in Manhattan, but it's, it's eerie and it's mysterious, and you as the viewer get to just sit back and see, like, that's kind of fucked up, but like not enough to be like, oh, this person's the bad guy or this person's doing this, so I just thought it was extremely well made. Interested to hear your thoughts on those little details and also the ending, because as we kind of mentioned, it doesn't leave you questioning too much at the end. It kind of spells it out, so what that means for all those hints that laid in the road ahead and how that all piles together, I'm excited to talk about in spoilers, so join us there if you dare. But
that was good. That was slick. That was real slick. I'm pretty much on the same boat as you are whenever it comes to rating it. I went into this film kind of a little trepidatious for multiple reasons, obviously due to the content, but as well as the fact of I try not to hype a film too much ahead of time there, because I feel like it tends to dampen the overall experience I have. But yes, I see exactly why my friend rated it a 10 out of 10. I totally see exactly where he's coming from. However, I don't believe I'm there anyhow. I don't believe so anyways. It might be one of those films like maybe The Shining or even American Psycho, where with each subsequent rewatch there, it just kind of just sweetens with each rewatch and kind of rewards me, because I know I rated American Psycho fairly low, but like it's just one of those films, just like The Shining, where it just resonates in the back of my mind and I think about scenes, and I think that's just signs of a really good movie.
Yeah, that's the only movie on this podcast I've given it 10 out of 10. If I recall.
Yes, and the only one I've given a 10 is The Shining so far there. There's definitely been some close ones. Yeah, definitely close. With this film, as I mentioned, it's not a 10, at least not yet. Like I said, American Psycho, I think I rated it an 8.5, and I think it's definitely up to a 9, just thinking about it as time has passed on. I need to rewatch it and confirm. But that being said, Rosemary's Baby for me gets a very strong 8.5. Like, I think it's one of those things that it's just a film that it feels super long to me. It's not bad. It's definitely not bad, but as opposed to something like The Shining, which is also a very long film, that it just feels like a whole experience to go through. This just feels like a very immersive descent, I would say. Not to say The Shining isn't a descent, because boy howdy is it there.
True.
But I feel like there was just like a couple of more hiccups I had more issues with. Again, kind of whenever it comes to performances outside of Mia Sparrow, who again, I feel like did flawlessly. I
Sure,
feel like
yeah.
she was great and perfect there. It's just, and again, wouldn't have it any other way. She needs to be the strongest actor in the film.
Mhm.
I feel like there's just other stuff there. I will say, if the film had ended more ambiguously, I don't know what it is about those endings. It's just one of those things like, I get it,
Mhm.
but at the same point, like, only so few films do it so perfectly.
Mhm.
I feel like it's like just it's sort of like it can be a cop out if it doesn't succeed there. And fortunately, this film just kind of buckles down. They're like, okay, we know the destination we're
Yeah.
going for. And
Yeah.
so I think I have nothing but mad kudos that they stuck to it there. So definitely needs to be a film to watch there. I will say, when it comes to the content, I might have been more disturbed with some stuff that happens in The Exorcist there,
Mm.
maybe, but it's about like on par, I would say, on shock value
Yeah, a
there,
little bit.
except
I
for
think
that
I-
one
I
scene
think
in The
I-
Exorcist
I
with the
definitely-
cross.
Yeah, I definitely left The Exorcist more disturbed than I think I would
Oh,
leave
yeah.
this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. This one's, just kind of displayed the content in a more, braced the audience a little bit more, I think. But,
Yes, exactly. So definitely glad I finally got around to watching it there, but I'm also very curious to kind of dive in. So now's your chance, in case you don't want to get spoiled about it. We're going to be talking about the film. So Aaron, please, I know there's a lot of bullet points you want to hit. I'll let you cherry pick the first one.
the first one, oh man, should we start at the end or the beginning?
That is a great question, because I think we're both thinking of the two satanic incidents
True.
there. I would definitely say,
Yeah, let's just set the scene. Yeah,
Yeah.
the first big
Yeah.
spoiler that we've had to dance around this whole time: the act of sexual violence. She gets drugged by her husband and raped by Satan, to have a little Satan baby. So that's
Mhm.
the kind of the spoiler that influences the whole movie. Once you know what is going on, is because
Mhm.
she has little Satan baby in her belly for these 9 months, and that's why it's a complicated pregnancy. And the fact that her husband's trying to hide the fact that, their witchcraft neighbors did a wee bit of raping, so that you can have the son of Satan.
yeah, it's one of those things that I feel like I knew about the sexual assault scene, and that was the thing that, again, I have seen it in films, and it's hard to sit through, and I get
It's
it.
never
I
comfortable,
understand,
yeah.
but whenever it came to this, while I was definitely disturbed by
Mhm.
it, they did it like as tastefully as you could have Satan sexually assaulting a woman can be.
Well, I think a lot of it was, it was definitely subdued by the fact that she was like drugged, you know what I mean? And it's from her perspective, so you're just getting little glimpses here and there, and spliced with things that aren't actually happening while things actually are happening, you know what I mean? And you kind of get you even kind of see some of the details later sneak back in of what she's remembering when she enters that hallway again at the film, because there's like a scene, because she eats this mousse that they give her, and that has a funny aftertaste because they're drugging her so they can do this thing, but she only eats a couple bites when she's supposed to eat the whole thing, and pretends to eat the whole thing, and throws the rest away. And so she's like awake during this thing she's not supposed to be awake in, so she's like in and out of consciousness and like hallucinating. But yeah, I thought it was really interesting. Like, one of the hallucination things she has is there's just this church that's on fire, and it just flashes for a few seconds or something. And then later at the end of the movie, you see her walking through the hallway, and there's a painting of that church on fire, and she's like, and it's starting to like click together for her. But
Yeah, it was, I mean, don't get me wrong, even though I was able to handle it okay, there's still a lot of stuff, like, especially because she is in that hallucinatory state there, because she's being drugged, basically, where you see this furry, scaly creature just laying on top of her
Yeah.
there, and she's trying to talk to what I assume is the Pope?
yeah,
Because they were talking about the Pope, right? Something like that. And so it's definitely weird to see her just kind of be nonchalantly talking to a Pope while Satan is lying on top of you. It was definitely one of those things that if I thought about it, it was definitely like, Okay, this is I'm getting super deep in the weeds emotionally. There, need to just stop what's going on there. But like I said, I was prepared for way worse. But the whole scene, I mean, it's definitely a satanic ritual scene there.
True.
And it's so like it's so disturbing to talk about, you know, because the whole thing is like has everybody in the room nude there, which is you know, again, fits with the occult, I guess. And then like whenever they're tying her legs down to the bed, they're like, oh, we're just trying to keep you from spasming there, and not actually what it's for. It even talking about it, it's like one of those things that watching it and understanding it, but having to describe it is just like it's making me go like, okay.
And like her husband's there, and he's naked too, and he's like, "Is she okay or something?" And they're like, "Look, I think she's awake," and they're like, "No, she can't be awake if she ate that whole thing," you know.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I was curious about is the hallucinatory images, like her at the ocean and she's on like this boating trip and everything there. Were you able to correlate what that was?
I don't remember all the things she sees because they just kind of flashed things in and out. Like I know there's like a scene where she's walking and then there's just this like mattress in the middle of the floor illuminated, and I was like, is this? And I was like, that must have been like real. But then and she's like talking to the Pope or at the ocean or seeing those things. It's definitely one of those things I'd have to like rewatch, knowing what I know now, and be like, okay, is this?
Yeah. Which surprisingly, I don't feel like Rosemary's Baby in comparison to other films that rewards rewatches there, like something like The Shining or American Psycho. I feel like there's not quite as many scenes there, which again, I have zero. I don't know. I mean,
so much that like
I mean, like obscure stuff like that. Obscure stuff. Whenever it comes to talking about like hints and stuff like that, it's not so much that as it is like the abstract.
Oh
yeah. No, because they definitely lace a lot of breadcrumbs for Rosemary to pick up. So I apologize for the misconstruction there. I was talking more of the abstract, like, you know, why is she at the ocean talking to these people saying, why can't he come on? I'm talking about the artistic abstract stuff, not the actual like hints they weave into the narrative so effortlessly. So my apologies. No, you're about to be like, you mean to tell me you didn't?
You mean to tell me you didn't pick up any hints?
What? The baby is Satan's kid?
Holy guacamole.
Yeah, no.
I must have missed something.
Man, I was zonked out of my mind, bro.
I was on that chocolate mousse shit, you know what I'm saying?
No, but I just meant artistically there, like, because I mean, there's some stuff like, yes, like the chamber and stuff, like how it looks totally makes sense. I mostly am talking about like the illusions of like the water and floating and being with the other women in like bikinis talking to that one dude, that sort of stuff there.
Yeah. There's a few like weird dream sequences like that. I'd have to go back and see if they mean anything. I don't like remember exactly what they are.
Yeah, and it's just and there's just a lot of stuff that's just very uncomfortable even before that scene, because whenever she does meet that one gal in a laundromat, it's like moments later where basically there's a crime scene and it shows that she jumped out the window there and like blood is splattered everywhere, and her role is just to show the good luck charm, being like, oh yeah, they gave me this good luck charm, smells weird but you know, never hurts to wear it, sort of thing.
Yeah, I feel like it definitely just adds that question mark over the neighbors immediately. You know what I mean? Because you already kind of suspicious of this place because the real estate dude or the landlord or whatever that's showing them this place is talking about how there's some shit here, and then I guess she talks to Hutch later or somebody, and they're like, isn't that the place where they like ate babies in the basement, and they had the family of witches, and so you start to uncover that there's something weird about this place, but you don't know like yet exactly where to point the weirdness at. And then whenever she's talking about how much she loves these neighbors that she's moved in with, and she has this funny smelling good luck charm, and then the next time she's dead, it's like, okay, well those neighbors are suspicious.
Yeah, and that's kind of like what possibly causes a bit of a problem for me is whenever Minnie comes up and says like, no, she can't be dead.
She
You know,
was
and
so
then
happy.
and then is so nonchalant seeing her dead body with her skull crushed area. She's
Mhm.
like, ah, such a shame. Like, it's just, I got drawn out of the film and I'm like, okay, I need to know, was this purposefully done to where she is so nonchalant there, or is it just the one note kind of?
She's just so like weird and old, and obviously you find out
Uh-huh.
later they're witches, and probably is the one that killed them. But like I just feel like
Yeah.
because her husband has the opposite reaction, where he's not necessarily disgusted, but he's like, "Oh yeah, no, she killed herself," and the wife's like, "No, there's no way she was so happy." And
Yeah, and so that was like another hint as well of like, are these secretly antagonist? That was my thing there as well. But then I felt like it's too obvious. Like,
right, I don't think the
yeah.
point is for the audience to be confused as to who's the antagonist. It's the audience is confused as to like exactly what they're doing, and then also a lot of the tension's caused by like they're doing something fucked up, but Rosemary doesn't necessarily know that, so that's a lot of the tension. And then you kind of know pretty early on the husband's part of it, and the doctor must be part of it, and it's just Rosemary that's putting these pieces together while you're kind of nervously following along like a baby in a kitchen full of knives or something. Like, okay, you're kind of like, no, while the baby figures out what's good and bad.
Yeah, it was definitely jarring. I do, and you brought up a good point. Whenever they're walking through the apartment there, I do like how they make the point about like, why is the dresser in front of the closet there? But
I
they
love
also don't like heavily focus on it. Like, she's obsessed with the closet. She's like, I feel like all of the actions Rosemary does throughout the film make sense. Now, whether they're like good decisions, bad decisions, to be determined, but they're understandable decisions there. Like, I know, like, whenever she gets rid of the charm there, I'm surprised that she didn't like maybe investigate it. But again, I think she's in a very distressed state there and just doesn't want to deal with it. So she's like, get rid of it. I don't want this anymore. So, and so I really like how her decisions are super believable. Like, I believed every decision she made is something that a person would do in this situation.
Yeah.
Of a sane mind, anyhow. And so
it's really just that like she's making normal decisions, and she's just constantly being gaslit or misled by her husband or her neighbors or her doctor or whatever. So she's like, isn't this like, this is weird, I should see another doctor. And her husband's like, no, you can't do that. And she's like, I'm having pain, isn't this weird? And her doctor's like, no, go away in a couple days. Like, so at every turn she's like, she's a sane, rational person. She's just being influenced by this echo chamber of nut jobs that want to, have her baby be Satan. But
yeah, exactly. And one of the other character changes, I would say that this is kind of what I have the issue with Guy's performance there, is after the assault scene happens, and she wakes up and has scratch marks on the side there. This is obviously before anything's confirmed, because like, obviously at this point you could say that the drugs were actual hallucinations, like none of that actually happened or whatever. But whenever it comes to him as a character, he turns out to be a bigger piece of rat than I expected. But I never picked up a sense that he was actually that awful at the beginning. I only got like sense of like, I don't know.
Well, it's because he's acting, I feel like he's an actor. He did a good job of pretending to be a caring husband, but really he was focused on his career, and he thought so little of his wife that he was like, yeah, your first baby could be Satan. It's like the same thing as if you had a miscarriage or something, right?
Gosh, yeah, it's one of those things that it's like, oh,
like
sort of things.
I feel like he did believe that he was, a good husband. He's doing this so I can have a good career, and then I can have a good family, and you can have your herb garden and, in the Beverly Hills or whatever.
Yeah.
He's just so much of a, self-centered, chauvinistic piece of shit.
Yes. I you hit it right on the head. Literal just, which again, I don't feel like it's bad writing. I feel like he's purposely supposed to be written like that. It's just,
And it's also the
I
60s.
feel like,
I mean, there's a lot
yes.
Or you could be he could be beating his wife. That'd be pretty normal for the season.
It was just definitely a shocking turn, like all of a sudden, because like as soon as they go over to the neighbor's house there, you know, they're like drinking, smoking there. He's just like pretty much infatuated, loves them there. But like the first hint that I knew that this was really bad was the fact that whenever she looks at the claw marks, he already has the answer, like, oh, I trimmed my nails this morning, you know, take care of it. And then it's just like, I figured you wouldn't mind if we did it there. She's like, I was unconscious there. He's like, what's the difference? I'm like,
he's like, I was drinking too. You know?
Yeah, and then he's like, you know, it's like something like necrophiliac. It was interesting, and I'm just like, oh my god, like, yeah,
and
literally.
She even says, she's like, I had a dream where I was raped.
Yeah,
and he was just like, well.
Yeah, just doing that there, which I mean, obviously, looking at it now makes sense, but it's just at the time you're like, what the heck, sort of. Going through there, and again it's like going through the motions, and again like how he constantly wants to hang out with the neighbors. I joked with Aaron, I said the real reason this is a horror movie for me is because her spouse is constantly inviting annoying neighbors over 24/7, and they're inviting other people to their house, which they don't want. I'm like, that's a real horror film.
Yeah,
that is a major horror film right there. I don't care what nobody says. This is a real horror that needs to have it. Unwelcome neighbors.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously, also looking back, it makes sense. I mean, it just all makes sense. Unfortunately, there. And whenever it comes to the I'm trying to remember whenever it came to him specifically wanting to have the kiddo on a certain day. It was June 26th, right?
I think so.
I'm trying to think. Was that and it's the year 66? Are they just trying to have it on 666?
666 maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I could probably see that anyhow. Makes sense. Satan baby and everything, but it just hit me just now thinking about it that I'm like, the year was 66 and oh no. But yeah, and that's again just another kind of thing, because like the thing I find interesting is the fact that going along, it doesn't confirm, like, you know, it's not completely confirmed, but while I was watching it, I'm like, I'm gonna have a hard time believing that none of this isn't actually happening, and it's like it was all just craziness, you know, like there's mold in the attic that makes women lose their minds, because they even talk about the previous tenant like going insane, right.
But it's and that's why I feel like, you know who the baddies are. You know, the baddies are like everybody pretty much. There might be a few people that you're like, maybe not, maybe this guy's misunderstanding or something, but pretty much everyone's in on it. And but the question is, what is it, you know? Like, what are they on? Is it because she, even for most of the movie, like once she starts figuring it out, she's like, oh, they want my baby so that they can use it in some sort of ritual or whatever and live forever or something. But no, it's that her baby's Satan. And they want Satan baby to be alive.
Yes, that's exactly it. And it's definitely, it's not a feel good movie for sure. It's a good movie, but not like you know, let's crack open a cold one and watch Rosemary's Baby.
Chillax, watch a funny flick like Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah. But it's so depressing seeing like Rosemary start to like just continue to look worse and worse, while her husband Guy is like suddenly getting this success, like, you know, oh, this dude went blind, so I got the part. Weird.
Right, and he feels like bad about it, and he feels like unnaturally bad about it at first, and it's because he's the one that made him blind.
Yes,
with witchcraft.
Yeah, and I think it's great that they answer pretty much like all of the questions that ends up being brought up, which I think again is very well done.
So good. And a lot of it is so subtle, like the closet thing, where they just are like, okay, let's move this thing, and then they show you the closet. She like digs all through it, and they're like, oh, well, it's a closet, you know. And it's not till later that it's like, well, there's something behind it, you know.
Yes.
And they don't bring it up all the time. It's the same thing with like there's one little comment where it just peaks, like after that first dinner with the neighbors, she was like, why didn't they have pictures on the wall? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, what are you talking about? I didn't notice. And he's like, well, there's hooks everywhere, but There's no pictures. Like, they took them down, and it's just like, whatever. And that's not even really, even at the end when you find out why, there's not a line about it. There's not anything. It's just she walks in the room and she kind of sees the portrait of Stephen whatever, which is like who the wait, no, his name's Stephen whatever. Whatever his father is, the old guy dad that's like apparently the bad witch dude or whatever. It's like a big painted portrait of him. And of course, they took that down and all the other family pictures that would connect them to a family of witchcraft wackos. But
yes, for sure. Definitely makes sense that they hide it. And again, I do like how they added that bit. I feel like they take their time to add these bits, which I think
some natural little line that they tossed in as they're walking back to their apartment and like making fun of the steak and stuff. You know?
Yeah, it's insane. By the way, the Roman Castevet there is an anagram for Stephen Marcato there, which I will say I really love the way they played out that scene there, because again, Hutch is kind of the foil to the antagonist there, and so not only is it good emotionally that she feels like she has somebody, but again, he also brings stuff to the table. It's like, whenever they're talking about, like, you know, stuff she's drinking, because of course Minnie's coming around giving her like pregnancy smoothies, you know, like, oh, it'll help the baby there, and then that good luck charm there. Whenever she mentions, like, I can't remember what herb they mentioned, or
something root. It's like tannin root or something.
Yes,
root.
And whenever Hutch smells it, he's like, that doesn't smell right.
He's like, no, that smells more like mold.
Yeah,
like, that's not a root.
And pretty much, and of course, whenever he starts getting suspicious, the thing I'm curious about is like how Guy, whenever he encounters Hutch and Rosemary having that lunch, that he knew that he would be a threat.
Yeah, well, I can't remember what Rosemary says, but yeah, he gets a weird, like they were talking, and I think there's some line that kind of piqued his thing, which is why he pulled that glove, took a glove from him. So that he could use it to kill him later or whatever, because you need an object from the other person to cast a curse or whatever. And then I think he knew something was up whenever he called and gave the phone to Rosemary, and she's like, he needs to meet with me. He's like, what about? I don't know. He wouldn't say. It has to be tomorrow. It seemed urgent or something. And he's like, he knows. You know? Yeah. Because I can't remember what it was, but I think she mentioned specifically. He was like, yeah, I told him about the smoothies and stuff, and he seemed concerned or something. It was some line like that. And he's like,
some line. And so I'm sure he's like, okay, I got to take care of it there.
But I love that he got put in a coma and then died, because that's what you hear happened to the lady of the apartment that they mentioned. Like the apartment that they're taking over.
I didn't even realize. Oh, no.
Yeah, they were like, yeah, because you remember, she's like, oh, yeah, because she's like, did she die here? And he was like, no, she's been in the hospital with coma for like 3 months or whatever. And then she woke up and then she died. And it was like, that's exactly what happened to this guy. Oh, but they don't tell you. They don't beat you over the head with it. They're just like, you know.
Oh, and there was that note at the beginning. What did that note say?
I remember. I was like, oh, that's probably
like, I'm not happy with the person I've become, or something like that.
It was one line. It was like 5 words or something.
I can no longer associate myself. That's what the note said.
I can no longer associate myself.
Yeah, definitely makes me curious how that plays. Again, I feel like there is like some stuff to watch in this film that rewards us second rewatch there, that you're able to piece together more and more. But that's so funny. I never put the two together there in the coma.
Yeah, I can't figure out exactly why the neighbors wanted her gone. Why they wanted her elderly neighbor gone. But
yeah,
maybe she found out something that they didn't know. But she did say that she grew all these herbs, and then these herbs are like, and they would give them to her neighbors or whatever, and then the whole herb garden was in her neighbor's. So I wonder if she was growing the root or whatever. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I bet she was there. I'm curious if they say at the beginning there, so have to go back and rewatch that. But yeah, I feel like Hutch is doing all this, but manages during the coma, whenever Rosemary goes to attend the funeral there after she gets the news that he died, that he left a book there, which is a book about witches there. Now, I'm curious, because you said he was like an Arthur friend, how he's able to make this connection there. But I guess it's because he meets Roman there, and he mentions specifically, like, you know, he had very piercing eyes, very distinguished individual, so maybe he did like research and found out, which is why he said like rearrange the name And so the reason why I thought that was going to be a bigger thing is like, okay, is this like some sort of thing where like the baby is going to be the new body since he's like elderly, 79, finding a new host? That was what I thought, and he was actually his dad.
I thought because they mentioned like a baby being eaten or whatever, like people being eaten, and then they found a baby in the bottom of the thing.
Yes.
I thought it was gonna be like something where it just keeps them young, not replacing the body, but like they all eat the baby or whatever.
Oh yeah, definitely would have also been disturbing. Definitely so. But I love the fact that the Scrabble board game, like they were playing it nonchalantly, like earlier in the film, and I never questioned it once because I'm like, yeah, they're playing Scrabble.
Right.
But like the fact they used that to establish that they do have Scrabble board, I mean, that's like just smart and brilliant. I feel like.
Yeah, it's just like one of those things that you didn't have to do that, but it makes it so much more rewarding later on when she whips out the Scrabble board and starts trying to rearrange the letters for the anagram. Yeah,
I thought that was a great scene and great usage of all that. But I feel like with Hutch's death, it also just kind of symbolizes that she's now alone because everybody is against her, because the doctor's telling her, you're over exaggerating, you're fine. And like everybody is just trying to dismiss everything she's going through. And I think it's such an interesting choice that towards the beginning of her pregnancy, she decides to cut all her hair off there. Yeah. And immediately everybody's like disgusted by it and hates it there. Makes me curious on what your thoughts were about like why character-wise or whatever they would decide to cut their hair off super short like that.
Yeah, she keeps on telling people like, oh, it's in fashion or whatever. But I feel like she's like, it's probably symbolizing like a big change in her life, like, and it shows how other people treat her. Like her husband's disgusted at her and like says she's hideous, and it's like, oh, that's kind of a weird thing for the loving husband that was so excited to have a baby, a second ago to say. But then I also think it kind of symbolizes a trauma response. You think Brittany shaving her head. You think a lot of women that go through major traumas, like, I don't know, being raped by a pack of old people or or for have Satan's baby. I think she knew internally something was wrong and like shaved her hair like that, or got it cut super short like that as like a trauma response. But
which that's not even a criticism. That's just a genuine question. Like, just to put it out there, I think it's great, but it's like also like so depressing because she genuinely, I don't know if it's just because of makeup or whatever, she just looks worse throughout the film there. Right. Obviously some of it's eye makeup making it like her eyes look baggy, but like even her frame, she was already pretty skinny at the beginning, but she just looks like just sickly.
She's lost weight. Yeah, and it's one of those things that gives Hutch like an immediate like, this guy's whack whenever what's his name comes in, old Steven,
Roman,
Steven, he comes in and he's like, it's very normal for women to lose weight in the first part of the pregnancy. She'll gain it all back later, like parroting the exact thing that Rosemary said. And he's like, oh, this guy's feeding her bullshit. But and all of her friends are like, she's supposed to be like 3 months pregnant in that scene because she was talking about how she's been experiencing this pain for 3 months, and there's no baby bump, no nothing, and all the women are just like, oh my god, like, are you okay?
Yeah,
they're trying to, like, some of them are nice about it, like, you look like you haven't slept in a while, and others are just like, you look awful. Like, is something wrong?
I just felt like that was also another important scene because I feel like too many times with films like this, they're too quickly trying to throw her towards like the deep end of the pool there. Right. But like showing that, she did have friends and people that cared about her, but it's like pretty much, of course, after she has the other friends over, like the husband's like having none of it there and starts having more control, through him and the neighbors as well there. Just the whole dadgum cult there, essentially, just making sure everything goes as planned. And I really like how much initiative she takes of, trying to figure this out. Like once she figures out the book thing, even though he dismisses it and then even throws a book away because he's like, you don't need that garbage there. Right. That she decides, no, I'm going out to, the bookstore to figure this out there. I'm done with this, and just finding out all the information. And again, I think it's such like it's such a good use of the plot to have her go out and do these things there, especially whenever it comes to like looking up and saying like, oh, if you're some people could be paralyzed, sickened and all this stuff there by stealing like an article of their clothing or something that belongs to them.
It
and
says
again,
blinded specifically, and that kind of gives her like, I'm gonna call this guy.
yeah, whenever they call the actor who lost a part who gave it to Guy, he just mentions like, oh yeah, I forgot my tie over there, I need to grab it sometime.
Yeah, she asked him, she was like, did you leave something of yours? And he's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, oh yeah, we traded ties, it doesn't matter, and he's like, oh, I have to go now.
Yeah, doing all that stuff. And so it's boiling up to a point, and you get to the point where she's like, I'm not seeing, Dr. Saberstein there. I'm going to see my old doctor because he's going to be honest with me. That's who I saw at the beginning of this whole thing before this mess started.
She does initially go to Dr. Saberstein or whatever, and then the receptionist is like...
Oh my gosh! Oh, how can I forget that?
Right. She's like, oh, I'm glad you she's like, what's that smell? Something else. She's like, wow, it's a big change from your usual smell. And she's like, what are you talking about? She's like, oh, oh yeah, the charm I used to wear, it's this smell. And the receptionist is like, yeah, if only we can get Dr. Saberstein to like ditch his or whatever. And he's like, oh, I don't think he has a good luck charm. It's just his aftershave or something. But it's the same smell. And it kind of clicks in her head that like, oh God, he's in it on it too. Like, of course he's in on it.
Yeah, because there's already hints that possibly he's in, but that kind of just seals the deal a bit, because before it's just kind of like, no, he's the best doctor in the city there, you need to keep seeing him. Everybody is like saying, you need to go see him, he knows what's best. So I think, yeah, that's a solid bullet point there. And so whenever she does choose to avoid that, again, I think it's like a great moment that adds. And whenever she's going to visit Dr. Hill and is having to word vomit all of this exposition of finding out
everything that's happened in the last 9 months, just like, hey, I know this might sound crazy, but here's a bunch of crazy shit.
Because like that's an interesting thing about it is like they do sprinkle in some like scenes that's definitely like about like her dietary choices there, whether it's like taking a steak, flipping it over on the stove for like 1 second on each side and then eating it just bloody raw practically, or eating the insides of a chicken.
It's just like eating the chicken heart or something, just raw. It gets worse and worse as the film goes on.
Yeah, it's like stuff like that. But then as she's having to exposition dump on Dr. Hill, and he's just very quiet, and you believe that he would be very quiet because it's a lot to take in.
Right.
And instead of immediately dismissing it, he's like, oh, you just rest here, we'll get you set up. And then what I'm guessing is the fact that he's in cahoots with them as well, possibly. I don't know. It's so
I didn't think that
open-ended.
I think he just was like, this woman's crazy, and was like, okay, she's obviously telling me crazy things. She's in hysterics, and I'm gonna call her husband to go pick her up, and the doctor that she's with now. Because even when she mentions the doctor, she was like, you would never think, and he was like, no, I would never, or whatever. And so you can kind of tell he's like, that's a really reputable doctor. So I think she's just crazy. Like, if she thinks that this doctor's in on it, her husband's in on it, her neighbors are in on it, like, and they're all witches. Like, he's like, he's never like, I don't believe you, but he's like, I don't believe in witchcraft, but no, you could be, in danger. Let me just chill here for a bit. And then, so I don't even think he's in on it per se. I think he was just like, yeah, this bitch crazy. Yeah,
that's fair. And I think I could totally see that, and I think you're probably right there.
See, he's not in the end scene either whenever they're like, but the doctor is.
That
Dr.
is true.
Sanderson's in the end scene, but like Dr. Hill or whatever is not.
Okay. Yeah, that definitely makes sense there. And so with that in mind, since it is kind of confirmed he wasn't in cahoots, that's another thing I will applaud this film, is the fact that her conclusion makes sense given all the pieces. Is it crazy and outlandish? Yes, absolutely, for certain. And she even like reads that, there's like, the devil's mushroom or whatever, which is like a fungus or something like that. So she's able to confirm all this stuff. You believe her explanation, but you also believe Dr. Hill's response of like, this is just insane. Because again, literally zero idea, been missing for a while there, just suddenly comes back and starts spouting off this stuff. Because that's the thing I hate, is whenever like a character makes a sound argument and the person's like, whatever, completely dismisses it. This is like the perfect believability of the characters making what is a rational logic in talking about it, but to the average Joe sounds like irrational babble.
Right.
And so I think that's definitely done well. It's also like very, I don't know what it is. It's like it was another disturbing scene whenever she runs back to the apartment and oh my gosh, I just understood how they got into the apartment. That's different. But I'm having these like aha moments throughout the entire talk we're doing. But whenever Rosemary tries to lock them out of the apartment saying like, no, I'm, go away. I'm not dealing with you guys anymore. Once she's just kind of like, I need to get away from y'all. I will say her method of getting away is kind of funny because they do make a point to show that yes, she has a lot of money and change on her there, but just spilling her purse and then both Guy and the doctor are like, oh, let me get that. It's like
up this money.
I'm at a weird place that yes, I would believe they would do that and everything, but just how nonchalantly they're like, pregnant women, am I right?
Yeah.
Dropping stuff all the time. But again, that's like very nitpicky, like doing that, but it is just a funny moment. I feel like it's a perfectly acceptable device to move the plot along. But the one thing I will say that was really disturbing is whenever everybody is able to sneak back into the apartment there.
You just see like a couple like people walk by through the doorway.
That was just silly because the way they're just like tiptoeing like a Scooby-Doo character. But the thing I found disturbing is like, at first they're trying to like calm her down, but then they're like all grappling her and everything. And then the doctor's feeling around, so everybody's like, oh, I believe it's time or whatever. It didn't even show anything like graphically horrific or anything, but just the whole emotional feeling of the scene. I'm just like, ooh, yeah, I don't like this.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if, it could have just been time because she was really close to her due date. She said it was on Tuesday or whatever. I'm not sure what day of the week it was, but yeah, they like inject her with something that they say is just a mild sedative. And she does pass out afterwards, but I wonder if they were like inducing labor. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
let's get this baby out now while she's not trying to kill us or herself.
Yeah, and it's just a whole roller coaster. Even whenever she wakes up and finds out she had the baby there, and the husband is being like very quiet about it. He's like, "Oh yeah, it's a boy," and that's all he's saying it was a boy, or he's very like vague about it.
Well, that part seemed like a dream or whatever, because then she like falls back asleep and then wakes up and opens her eyes, and then it's that lady there instead, and she's like, "Where's the baby?" And she's just like, "Let me get the doctor for you."
Oh, that's a good observation. I tell you what, that's a good observation right there, Aaron.
That's what I think. But it definitely could have been that she did wake up and talk to him and then fell asleep and then woke back up again, But
whenever it's them also announcing that the baby didn't make it or whatever, that's also still pretty horrifying. Like that's horrifying enough there to where it's just like a miscarriage is already like a terrible thing there, but already with the context blowing up, and then freaking Guy over here is like, we'll try again later in a few months. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's just so uncharacteristically asshole-ish of just
right. You could tell he does not have any empathy for the process of pregnancy or whatever, which we as the viewer have been witnessing her, struggle with for 9 months, and he's just like, what's the difference? Is one baby down, whatever, 9 months. We'll do it again.
Yeah, and it's like I argue that I believe someone could believe that, but also for me it just seems kind of outlandish. But then like because that's it, and obviously the reason context wise is he knows that the baby is actually alive and is trying to reassure her, trying to keep it calm or whatever. And I do love that whenever it comes to them taking care of them, they still want to get the breast milk out, and then like as soon as she dips the spoon and she's like, oh, don't do that, and it's like, I thought you're throwing it out. It's like, it's not safe, or
it's just messy.
Doing that, it's
she's clever, like you can tell. She as soon as they're like, the baby didn't make it, she's like, bullshit, like you took it,
especially hearing the baby cry,
right? And then she hears the baby cry later, and that I think that's why she tests her little breast milk thing by putting the spoon in it, because she asks, what do you do with it anyway? She's like, I just throw it out. Then she puts the spoon in it to be like, Are you really throwing it out? Or are
Yeah,
you giving
like
it to
call
that
the
baby?
bluff.
Yeah.
And I really like that. I really feel like everything they do like is super well placed, especially like whenever it comes to her refusing to take the medication and the pills they're giving her and like stuffing it perfectly in the crack of the bed frame there. And I do like how basically, everybody is gone. We know the reason why, because they think again, like, she's out of it. She's not going to do anything. She's been
took her
taking her
pill.
meds. Yeah. And so whenever she finally has just kind of had enough and decides, because how does she decide to go to the closet there? Was it just like something like...
I think she just instinct, I guess. I don't think she has like a reason or she doesn't vocalize one. She just goes straight there.
Putting the pieces together of, okay,
She's like,
maybe there's a reason the dresser was here.
Right. The reason the dresser was there, and also like that she knows that side faces their residence or whatever. 'Cause they share a wall,
But I love how she goes about it, because she's like fully prepared, She's like checking, she's looking, she's like, okay, there's a hallway, running to the kitchen, grabbing a knife to get ready for whatever happens next. And then the question is, like, I'm curious on how she got in, like, unless the door was just already unlocked, because they're like, no one's going to check through here at all. But yeah, that whole, as soon as you get to like the hallway there, they did a good job of somehow making it feel like you're in hell without making it explicitly cartoonishly hellish.
Right.
There, because it shows the painting of like the burning church there and like this different art throughout the gallery there. And then they walk over to the room where they're seeing everyone, have a party there. And then they like turn around to realize, uh-oh, she found out that we're a cult. Oh no. Which I say that in jest or whatever. Obviously, it's like a real suspenseful scene in the way that's done, and the way they try to talk her down is interesting, because I thought she was just going to start hacking and slashing.
I thought she was going to stab someone, or like stab herself or something.
Yeah, something like that. But
Kill the
surprisingly, she surprisingly doesn't do any of that. But that's like around this point, the man who's playing Roman, the elderly person, just is like, all right, beans out, let me just spill it out for you. You gave your Satan's kiddo's mom. How about that, Adrian? And doing that, and then he's like going full, satanic, like, hail Satan. Yeah, which is weird to see.
It was very, like, I can tell this is a book adaptation. I'm like, this is how the book would end for sure. And like movies, especially modern movies, I feel like they're just like, okay, and action scene, some cars explode.
Yes.
Great. That's the end. That's how you end a movie. But this is a very literary ending where it's like they've been sprinkling in these little magical realism things, and then at the end they're just like, yep, room full of people saying hail Satan. Very like eyes wide shut. Very just like here's a really jarring thing that's like within the realm of possibility, but like now that we're at the end of the movie, we can just mask off,
Yeah, especially because like throughout the whole film, it's surprisingly fairly like, I wouldn't say mundane, but it just is not like, it's such a stark contrast to the ending there. Yeah. But I also believe it, which I feel
that's the term magical realism. Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's still realistic. This you can imagine this happening in real day life. This isn't Harry Potter or whatever.
Yeah.
This is like, okay, this might be happening in some apartment in Manhattan. Is these people believe that they're making Satan or whatever? And then the little dash of magic is like, yep, that's actually Satan's baby. Yep. Yeah, like he's got crazy little lizard eyes, and that's Satan's baby.
Yeah, I think that hits it right on the head whenever it comes to that. But I feel like it's so interesting because, again, I guess to their eyes, they're just like, they surprisingly don't try to restrain her or do anything. Granted, she has a knife, so I'm sure they don't want to approach her either. But whenever she like decides to I guess she drops the knife before visiting the baby, correct? There.
Yeah, she's like shocked by something, and she just drops it into the floor.
Yeah, and then
I think she has it when she's originally looking at the baby for the first time. But
okay, that's what it was.
she
but
just catches
kind
his
of
eyes, and
horrified.
she's like horrified. She drops the knife or whatever.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Yeah, a lot was going on for us to process during that point, but yeah, like just having a straight up demonic baby, which they don't really show. They only show like a vignette, like overlaying the current scene of like the piercing eyes, which I think good move on their part. There just makes it a lot more horrifying. Like, you know,
especially since the
imagining.
special effects weren't like amazing. Even the sexual assault scene with the devil, I was like, is that? I thought it was like maybe the old guy in a costume.
Yeah, it was definitely
but it was supposed
not
to
the
be
greatest,
the devil.
but yes, definitely Satan. And so, you know, she's horrified that basically she's had Satan's baby in her stomach the past 9 months there. And whenever she drops the knife, you know, Minnie's like, you know, casually picking up like, oh yeah, we have people come in here with knives all the time.
Kind of scrubs the buff out the floor.
You know, and it all Rosemary could do is just collapse into the chair as she's like taking this all in, which is a lot to take in. Like, obviously she was leading, she had the clues and everything. It's just the final answer, which again, I'm very surprised we got, because I don't know if you felt this way. I thought it was going to be one of those ambiguous things where like she kills herself or something with the baby and you never know like whether she was crazy or she was actually pregnant with Satan's child. And I gotta be honest, I'm glad there's a definitive answer.
Right, she kind of stands, and there is a little bit of mystery, because it's obviously like, okay, what happens next with Satan's baby and her in this weird cult or whatever. But it's like, yeah, it's like an acceptable level of having a neat bow tied to it.
Yes,
it's like her motherly instincts take over. She's been trying for this baby so long, and she's like, okay, I'll raise this weird little Satan baby.
Yeah, it's such a weird scene. But I feel like this is such like a good moment here. Is like, Guy, whenever he sees that she has found out, you could tell he's horribly embarrassed. Like he does have a bit of remorse, which I like, if it wasn't for the fact he was so asshole-ish throughout the majority of the film. Like, literally, even whenever it came to her friends that came over, he was like, these bitches. And I'm like, holy cow.
Yeah, because he doesn't want to be found out. He wants the plot to go nice and smooth, and for her to have the baby, and oh no, we lost it, and they'll be sympathetic, and then they have, you know, their actual family full of 3 babies, and let the Satan people have their weird little Satan baby.
Yeah.
And he has his great career now. That was what he wanted, and every step of the way it gets ruined, and he gets mad, and he just tries to rationalize it. I mean, even in that scene where he's like sympathetic a little bit because he's embarrassed, he's also a giant dick because he's like, it'd be the same thing as if you lost the baby into pregnancy, right? It's like the same thing.
It's so bad. Like, I feel like, again, they're just making this big asshole of a character there, and they succeed, boy howdy there. And it's just one of those things, like, just hearing him say that, I'm just like, oh, that just, oof. But that's like just kind of the weird thing is, again, whenever she does decide to approach a baby, and it seems like she's like just kind of fond of Satan's child there, it does raise the question of what next,
right
there, which I mean, that seems to be open-ended, if I'm not mistaken there.
But yeah, I'm with you. I definitely thought she was going to grab the baby and jump out the window.
That's what I thought too. I thought that's what she was going to do, which again, maybe that's like the ending that like, oh, the good, and he took out, you know, the spawn of Satan there. But at the same point, he'd probably just not the ending the story was trying to be there. But yeah, I mean, overall, I feel like I am perfectly A-okay with the way the film ended, despite how dark it was there. But it is kind of I mean, it's definitely depressing just to be like, okay, she's at this point where she's like, well, it's my child, I'm like going to take care of it.
She's lost everything, and she's a prisoner to these people anyways, so just like the Stockholm syndrome takes over, and she's just like, yeah,
even talking about
this
it,
is
just
my baby.
It's like that just deeply kind of disturbing horror there. Not even it's just like the whole like emotional horror. I think that's kind of like the best way to describe this, as emotional.
Yeah,
doing that. But yeah, It's crazy, dog. It's real crazy there.
Shit's wacky.
Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about with Rosemary's Baby? I feel like we hit a lot of the big main bullet points there, but there's a lot to take away from this film.
No, I mean, this is definitely one of those ones where you could just talk about little details for days, but I'll save it. I'm just going to be going home wondering what they were doing sneaking into that poor old woman's apartment that caused her to drag that thing in front, or did they just drag it in front after they were done casting the spell on her? Did the neighbors drag the big furniture in front? I don't know. Who did it?
Yes, who done it indeedy? Who done it indeedy? Okay, so with that in mind, I feel like we're just going to keep moving on to the next film we're going to be watching. Yes. So this film is going to jump up like barely over 50 years later. Whoa. So we're jumping to the magical year of 2019 here. Wow. This film is also going to be kind of in a similar vein as this one, I would imagine there. Okay. And one of the biggest draws of it is it has a lot of flowers. A lot of flowers, I was thinking April showers bring May flowers sort of thing there. So it's a very bright and colorful film that we're going to be watching here. And it's because it's almost towards the middle of summer.
Midsummer?
Yes, that was my very poor man's way of getting to that transition there.
I was thinking of that film in my head. I could not remember the title, so I'm glad you said that, because I was pretty sure it's this one.
It's one of those things that I was like, should we jump to another kind of more thriller-esque sort of horror there? Yeah, sure, why not? Sounds fine. So, yes, thank you all so much for listening to this episode, and we'll see y'all again next time when we're popping the scary with Midsummer.
Midsummer.
This is, yes,
Midsummer. Sawed it.
Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube, Castbox, or iTunes platforms to stay up to date when new episodes drop. To see what Aaron and I are up to, check out our respective Twitter accounts. For me, it is @CoalkirkVA, and for Aaron, it is @AnimalGameDev. Thank you all so much for listening to our podcast. We'll speak to you all again next time when we're popping the scary.